Hi, welcome to this section of the Stages Festival where we are going to be doing a feedback session based on the reading of The Bully Problem that we did recently. Hopefully you got a chance to see that. This is an opportunity to see the kind of work that we do on a regular basis here at New Musicals Inc., where we will see a reading, jot down a lot of notes, and then have a session with the writer giving feedback about where the draft is in the process of the development of the piece. I'm Elise Dewsberry. I'm the Artistic Director of New Musicals Inc.
I'm Scott Guy. I'm the Executive Director and also the founder of the Lyric Lab here. And just off camera here, we have Michael Gordon Shapiro, who did music, book, and lyrics, and the director of the reading, Joshua Finkel. So when we're looking there, that's at whom we are looking.
And let me clarify a couple things before we get started, which first of all is that usually when we give this kind of a feedback session, especially at the beginning, it's our recommendation that it not really be a dialogue, which is why we put Michael and Joshua off camera. Let me explain why that is. We feel pretty strongly that when you get feedback, one of the best things you can do as a writer, you're going to get a lot of feedback. Whenever you present a work, everybody and their uncle has things to say about it, and we're just, some more people like your uncle who've got something to say about it. All we ask is that you listen to what we have to say. Think about it. Decide what's useful to you and what isn't. Use what's useful, discard what isn't. There is no reason to defend your position with us because it's your show. You get to write whatever you want. So if you disagree with something I say, you could just disagree and not do it. You don't need to engage me on that. If I haven't understood something, if you think I didn't understand something and you feel the urge to explain, so and Michael's been through this many times, so he knows how to bite his tongue. So because the way I approach it is I'm speaking as if I'm an audience member, I'm watching the show. As the writer, you don't get to come out and explain to me, well, he said that because when he was 12, his mother did. You don't get that opportunity. So as an audience member, if I didn't understand something, your response shouldn't be to explain it to me. It should be thinking, how could I have incorporated an explanation or made that more clear within the script? So again, that doesn't require engaging in conversation. That's not to say that we aren't willing to have a conversation, and we probably will after this session have a conversation with Michael and with Joshua, but we feel that it's more efficient to simply let us say what we need to say.
There's also another bigger reason too, that if the author says, well, here's what I was intending to do, la 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 la, that's much less useful conversation than for us to say, here's what we perceive your intention to be, here's what's coming across, here's how we're perceiving what you have written, because that's really useful information for the writer to understand. It's like, that's what they think I was doing, huh? And just explaining it, we might go, oh, well.
Now that I see what you meant, it changes all my feedback, and that's not really useful because again, when I'm sitting in the audience, I don't get to know your intention, and I don't get for you to explain things to me. So that being said, that's what I usually recommend. I do these kinds of sessions by video conference, by videotape, by recording, and I always say that at the beginning. If I have things to say that are useful to you and resonate, use them. If you disagree and they don't resonate, don't use them. It's as simple as that. We're going to start off this session by doing what we consider to be an overview. So I have, in addition to notes within the script while I was watching the show, I was jotting things down. I also was writing down sort of bigger picture things that had to do with that. By the end of the piece, here's sort of my bigger picture ideas. I'm going to go through my bigger picture ideas, and then Scott will do the same. And
in general, I'll be concentrating on the lyrics and Elise on the book.
But there's always a lot of overlap.
And we often have a third person with us that would concentrate on the music. We don't today.
Right. Okay, so let me get started on my overview. I want to say, first of all, Michael, you and I have been working on this piece for a while now together from the outline form and the first draft, and it was such a pleasure and an honor to get a chance to actually see it. I thought that the draft is in really good shape, that Joshua, your director, did an amazing job of bringing to life a very big show with a very big cast in a very small space with very little rehearsal time, and made everything really clear for us. So as an audience, I think people in the audience who are experiencing it for their first time really could understand what was happening. Your cast was amazing, and I think it was pretty clear to you in the moment that your audience was having a great time. And that is the best feedback that you can get, is that your audience had a great time. I heard a lot of people saying good things about it afterwards. People have been sending us some emails that I'll forward to you, and you've got comment sheets, and people were really enjoying it. And I think it's because the show on the whole, what it does really well is it speaks to that person inside of each of us who feels inadequate, who feels like they can't function in the world, who feels like there are bullies out there that make your life difficult. It speaks to those people, it gives them a rallying cry, and it takes them through a wonderful journey. And I think we enjoy going on that journey with these characters you've created for us. And it's funny, and it's witty, and the songs are tuneful, and the characters are fun, and so all of those things are fantastic.
Great, there you go. Thank you for coming. Yeah.
Now, from an overview, I'm gonna look at it from two different standpoints. One is that I think you already know without having heard the feedback from other people, that probably the biggest issue you have at the moment is that the show is too long. So even if it were 100% perfect and everything about it was perfect, it's too long. And that's one of several people sent feedback saying, loved it, too long, loved it, too long. And the important thing to know is that that's often the case with the first draft that gets in front of an audience for a first reading. Nothing wrong with that. But then you're faced with, so what do I do now? How do I shorten the show and still maintain the integrity of the story that I'm trying to tell? So I'm going to talk about some arenas in which I think you could make cuts, because I think that to help you just in that standpoint. So not necessarily saying this doesn't work, but do you need it? Is it something that could go so that you can shorten things? And then the points that I'm going to talk about story-wise, I'll relate back to say, for a lot of reasons, this is why I'm saying this could go, because of how it fits into some of my other story points. So I'll start with story points. Number one is, and this is something we've talked about from the very beginning of the outline, it's always been a struggle to figure out how to keep Kevin active in his own story as a lead character. He gets acted upon a great deal. Things happen to him. Bullies bully him. Things happen to him, and so and I know you've worked really hard, and I think there are lots of areas in which you've gone out of your way to activate him. I think there's more work to be done there, and some of the trickiest parts are that there are various points during the show where solutions happen for problems, and almost many of those times the solutions come from someone other than Kevin. Oscar proffers some solutions. Katie saves the day near the end. Katie comes up with a great idea. Mom, at the very end of the day, comes up with a moment where she stands up for Kevin. Dad shows up when Kevin needs him and provides him with what he needs to go on. So it's not that any one of those things is problematic, but cumulatively, what we're looking for is, and I wrote this here, I said, when is it Kevin's turn? When does Kevin get to be the one who solves his own problem? And I think that's still missing from the show. That's going to relate to some of the things that I'm going to talk about that you could lose, because some of those things are the things that are accomplishing goals that I think it would be wise to look for a way that Kevin could accomplish the goal instead of some of these other things. Okay, the next Kevin, in addition to just activating Kevin in general so that he is an active character as opposed to a passive lead, what you've tried really hard to do that I can see is to create tension because of the ongoing issue that once he decides that what he wants more than anything in the world is to get into this school where he can get away from the bullies and away from these petty other subjects that he's not interested in and all these people that he's not interested in, and he can concentrate on what he loves and have his world be, or at least he thinks that's what will happen if he gets this scholarship. So once he's decided he's going to do that, he does take some steps to try to make sure that he can get the scholarship, figuring out how to deal with Oscar so that Oscar will be able to tutor him and all that. What you've done then is try to create conflict by making it hard for him to accomplish that, because the kids find out about Oscar and then he's supposed to be their bodyguard, so there's this repeat beat of I want to study with Oscar, but he's busy being a bodyguard. And that does create a certain amount of tension, but it's a bit of a passive approach. Again, it's that he isn't trying to do anything to accomplish his goal. He's being prevented from doing anything, and that's what's causing the conflict. So although it causes conflict, it's still a passive form of conflict. And so, how do you get out of that? I don't know that I can give you a magic bullet, but I think you might concentrate less on his inability to find time to study, and more on the fact that he is progressing. It might be more important that he actually is progressing. You have some moments in the show where we see him making some strides, particularly in areas that he is the worst at, which is primarily literature and English, because he's not interested in it. But we see him making some strides. I think if you connect that to this kid who thinks that his biggest issue is he can't relate to other people, and he thinks that math is a way to escape from that. He does not need to connect with a person and deal with their unpredictability and their emotions and all of that stuff. If he could just deal with math, which is 1 + 1 = 2, and there's no argument there. Over his journey as a lead character is in discovering that despite all of the problems in dealing with people, there is value to be found in having those dealings with people. And I'd like to see you concentrate more on those moments where he finds value in communicating with the Katies and the Margarets and the Adas and the Charlottes and everybody else in the show, so that cumulatively he starts to realize, as much as I love math, this stuff is starting to be important to me in a way I didn't expect. And I'd like to see a little more emphasis on that and a little less on I want to study for the test but I can't because my robot's busy, which becomes sort of your main conflict for him all the way through. So that's the main thing about Kevin. Dad, let me talk a little bit about Dad. I think Dad performs an interesting function in the show. My problem with him right at the moment is that he performs at least 3 functions in the show. And I think you need to really sort of decide, do you need him for any of them? And if so, which one is the most important and how can you be consistent? For me, he starts out, at least, and this might be somewhat about stage directions as well, starts out he goes to sleep and seems to have a dream. Within that dream, Kevin's dreams,
yeah.
And Dad comes to him in the dream. Within that dream, there's a moment where I was listening to it thinking, wait, this isn't actually a dream, it's a memory. So then I got confused. Is he dreaming about Dad? Is he having a memory about Dad? And then later on, especially in Act 2, Dad becomes a vision. Dad becomes a spirit guide, a ghostly spirit guide who appears in order to help his son. Any one of those could work, but I think they can't coexist. I think you'd have to make a decision about what is he? Is he a memory? And in that case, you have the issue that Scott and I were talking about earlier, which is that if he already had these experiences with Dad, why didn't they work the first time he had them? Why did they have to happen now? So that would be where a memory might not be really useful to you. A vision might be more useful to you, but Dad appears as a spirit guide in order to help him make these decisions. Now, I'm going to go over for a moment to my other side about cutting things. And some of these are going to be radical. And again, you're not going to respond to all of them, but I'm going to throw a bunch of radical thoughts out because something's got to stick in order for you to shorten the show.
Like cut the bullies? You're saying just cut all the bullies?
Dad is on, for me, is one of the things that could go on the chopping block because first of all, you have to figure out how he functions. If he already heard this stuff from Dad in the past, then why didn't it work the first time? It could be because he was too young, but that's a lot to explain. If Dad is a vision, then this becomes a different kind of a piece. It becomes do we believe in ghosts? Do we believe in visions? And then it's Dad doing the work. Again, it's not Kevin solving his own problem. It's Dad showing up in order to solve the problem for Kevin. And Dad has already done that by leaving behind Oscar. So Oscar is already the surrogate for Dad, who has already provided this. That was one of the things that occurred to me was, what if Oscar has several tapes, not just the one that was left for Mom? So if Dad is trying to get a message to Kevin, perhaps it could be through a tape where he actually is giving him a message. But on the chopping block, I would say consider what would happen if Dad just wasn't even part of the show and Kevin had to sort this stuff out on his own. Might activate Kevin and shorten the show. But if you keep Dad, I would encourage you to really determine how does he function, and then be really hard on yourself to make sure that you are consistent within that functionality. Tiny sideline, but there are, I would say, 4 or 5, maybe half a dozen spots in the show where you kill your applause with some cute little joke at the end of a song where we've just been building up to a really fun climax, and then there's a cute, fun little joke, but it totally kills the applause. And once or twice, I think maybe you can get away with that once in a show, but by the time it happens 3 or 4 times, it's like, really, can you let them applaud? The joke isn't worth it at that point. We talk for a little bit about Kevin and Margaret. you have a sort of a side. This is sort of the manifestation of the idea that Kevin learns what the pleasures are about communicating with other people. It's about friendship. It's about relationships, and he sort of discovers that through his relationship with Margaret. I would say at the moment that relationship takes place almost completely in Act Two. He doesn't really notice Margaret at all in Act One, and so I don't think you laid the groundwork for anything to come of that relationship. So by the time we get to the Off Balance song, which I think is a lovely moment, it feels unearned to me, because I can't quite believe he's off balance when he seemed to meet her and go immediately. What I'm missing, besides some of that groundwork being laid in Act One, that is what I think needs to happen in Act One, is why is he interested in Margaret? What is it about her that allows him to get past this thing that he has with people? There has to be something specific, and I would think, my guess is it has to be about math, because unless he makes a connection with somebody on something that's meaningful to him, they're just an impediment to him being involved in math. So somehow or other, Margaret has to make him go, you have something interesting to say that I actually am interested in, huh? And I think we need a couple of those moments before we get to the point where he can be put off balance by her. It can't just be, a girl talk to me, which is what it feels like now. Because I don't think you're talking about a kid going through puberty who suddenly is interested in a girl. That would be, I don't know, I think there's a lot more going on here. And I think he has to realize that a girl has something to offer. So back over to my radical suggestions. I would suggest that you consider the possibility of combining the characters of Katie and Margaret. I totally know why you have tried to create two different characters, and why you don't want the only strong woman in the show to also be the love interest, and there's a lot of other reasons for that. But the problem is Katie winds up getting a lot of stage time that's basically stolen away from Margaret, and it's hard to balance the two. So I would make one of two radical suggestions. Combine Katie and Margaret and have it be a relationship that Kevin experiences with Margaret that makes him realize there's something else there. Or combine the two of them and have it not be a relationship. Kevin's solution to this does not have to be falling in love. Kevin's solution in this story is learning how to relate to other people. So that involves friendships. It does not have to involve a relationship. But I think trying to make both of them exist in the same show is one of the things that's making the show long, in order to give them the stage time they need for those things to happen. When you get to a song like what I wrote about Off Balance specifically as a song, is I said what's happening right now in Off Balance is the song is a reaction to the connection that they have discovered between them. And I would really encourage you to think about the power of musical theater for this moment to be the connection, that the discovery that there's a connection is a musical moment, as opposed to just the reaction to the fact, we have a connection, therefore let's sing about it. I would encourage you to think about, is there a way to have the connection happen as part of a musical moment? This is another tiny little sideline. This is a personal peeve of mine, and this is the kind of thing that, again, when the show is running long and it's a first draft, you start to realize that there are passages where the doodle underscoring is going on page after page after page, and I personally cannot stand that. So I think we can't handle underscoring that's just marking time for much longer than, I don't know, 10 or 15 seconds, maybe 30 if we're lucky. After that, you either have to shorten the dialogue where that's happening, you have to figure out a way to end the song and restart it, and this happens often in a second or a third draft, or once you go into production, you have to start being more specific about that underscoring, and it can't just be, I'm just going to keep the rhythm going. For me, one of the best things that fixes that is just take the rhythm out and just let it punctuate the moment. So it's actually a participant in the scene. It's actually responding to the emotional development of the scene instead of just literally keeping time until we're ready to start singing again. Okay, so those are. Let me go over to my my other radical ideas for shortening the show, because those are all of my main overview points. So I talked about the Katie Margaret idea. I talked about Dad. I would take a strong look at Ada, Bertram, Charlie, all of your secondary characters, and make absolutely sure you need absolutely every one of them. Maybe you do, but it's a place to look. Is there, because you've tried, and this is a good thing, you've tried in each case to give them an arc, to give them a story, to give them a character, and you've done a great job. It's taking stage time. So when you're trying to shorten the show, that's a place to look.
That's true. It's true, because if you have 10 characters and you give them 2 minutes, that's 20 minutes.
And I don't blame you for doing it. Right. It's a good thing that you, and it's one of the things that your actors loved. Those characters were fully fleshed out, but it has ramifications. The assistant principal. Personally, I am in particular his song. I'm not sure you need him at all in the show. His song for me is placed in a very awkward place, because we've reached a point where we're, I don't know, 3/4 of the way through the second act or halfway through the second act. Things are moving along, things are happening, and we have to stop to listen to this song by the assistant principal. So for my taste, it doesn't matter how good the song is. I am not interested in the assistant principal at that point in the story. And what he accomplishes in that song could be accomplished with 2 lines of dialogue. I understand the rationale for wanting to make sure the character has interesting stuff to do and the character follows through, but I think it's too much stage time in that moment. So I would consider, do you need the assistant principal? Do you need a song? Can you find a way to get a song into the first act? But right now, it doesn't feel well placed when you're running long. Okay. So the junior, the idea that he misses out on the junior high program and has to take the senior high program, and then later what that means is he's fighting and fighting. In order to try and fix things with Oscar, he almost loses the chance to go and take his test, but everybody bands together to help him go and take his test, and he takes his test, and then it turns out that he's not allowed to, because it's the high school test and he wasn't allowed to do it. That late in the day, in a show that's already that long, that is an extra bump we just didn't need. I didn't think we needed that extra bump, because we felt like we were wrapping things up and felt like, okay, well now we gotta deal with another problem. And then it was Mom that solved that problem, not Kevin. So I would really consider, do you need that extra issue? It's enough of an issue that he really, really wants to get into this school. He really, really wants to take this test. He's willing to sacrifice it for his friends, which I think you could make more of. He's willing to sacrifice what he thought was the most important thing in the world to him in order to help his friends, because he's reached a new point in his life. So that's already his arc. He thought he wanted something, he learned how important it was, but he still gets to have what he wanted, even though he was willing to sacrifice it. That's enough of an arc. Don't need another beat in there, I don't think. Not in a show that's running long. And then in the same arena, this might be maybe in some ways the most radical suggestion. I'm not sure whether you need junior high bullies and senior high bullies. I love all your bullies. You have created wonderful characters for them. The scenes with the senior high bullies are really funny, but once again, in order to make them so interesting, you have to give them stage time. And when you're looking for places to cut, I would say do you really need it? He's going to get all the problem he needs from the junior high bullies. Do you really need to have senior high bullies? Is it not enough? So those are, those suggestions about the junior high versus senior high bullies, and the Katie Margaret, and the business of whether he's doing the high school or the junior high. These are all things that I don't necessarily think are problems in your story. I think they are problems in the length of your show. But the beauty is that you have an opportunity to focus your show and really zero in on Kevin's arc. What do you need in order to get Kevin to take the arc you want? So I would say consider the fact that your show is too long as a gift to you. To say, if I have to hack a half an hour, 40 minutes off this show, which is brutal, then let me really think about what do I need in order to get Kevin from point A to the end of the show, and everything else doesn't matter. And that's all I have to say.
That's great.
I want to start by just framing a couple questions. I came to this show for the first time when I saw it on Sunday. I didn't know, in fact, that spoiler alert, it's about a robot, or it contains a robot. I didn't even know that about it. So my responses are what I received from the direction that you gave it. I thought it was really, really clear direction. I thought the beats are clear. I thought what you're aiming for in this scene is clear. I don't think I was confused about the plot or what's happening in that scene. So my questions are not ones about clarity; they're ones about intent. Of what's your thesis? What does Kevin learn? And so let me take a couple stabs at that, and not necessarily looking for am I right, but have you go, oh, that's what he. I don't think I'm terribly off here, but so Kevin's got a couple problems. His noisiest one is he wants to get into this advanced school where he can do math all the time, and another problem is that he has bullies beating him up and taking his bus money. So those are his two big problems. Pretty clear. But I'm not quite sure how the action of the show and the songs, I'll pick up a couple of songs, how they relate to him trying to solve the problem. Let's take them both one after another. What does he want? He wants to get into an advanced math school. So what does he do in order to accomplish that? He applies, does the essay, and he probably has some money issues because his mom has some money issues. But what else? What does having a robot have to do with getting into school? What does try to relearn whatever lessons his dad was trying to teach him have to do with getting into school? What does his relationship with Margaret have to do with getting into school? And it's like, see, it's happening to the same guy, but I don't know how it's related to his problem or his need or his want. So, playwriting 101 of what does he want? He wants to get into school. What's standing in his way? Mom's money at the moment. And yet this is not a show about mom and her money. It's not a show about not having enough money to get into the right school. So his personal issues that Elise was talking about, of needing to relate to people, or needing to find the same kind of joy he gets in math, to find that in people, those don't yet seem to be related to his need or want, and therefore a lot of the beats seem not linear in terms of him trying to get what he wants. I think in the next pass of the show, you might say, so am I being well served by what does he really want? He really wants to get into this school. What does he do to get it? Then make a list of the things that he's doing to get it, and try to figure out how to make that harder. And again, classic playwriting, make the force of opposition harder. And I don't know what the force of opposition to getting into school is. Write the essay, get the money. Get the good grades, write the essay, get in. And that's not the story, that's not the action, it's not what the kids are involved in. So then the second area, Kevin's other problem is that bullies are beating him up. I see that, it's clear, I see why he hates that, and I see why his retreat into math is a retreat. He gets to go home and go like, okay, thank heavens, no one's beating me up here, I just get to do my math, I'm so happy here. That gets you to about scene 2, or the second song of the show, and then I'm not sure what the relationship between bullies and math is. Aside from math being an escape, I would love somehow that his propensity for math, his ability to solve math problems, is what solves the bully problem. Whenever you see the title, The Bully Problem, I think it's going to be a show about standing up to the bullies. And that's a portion of it. There's some action late in Act 2 in which a bunch of kids get together and say, we're not going to put up with this anymore. Let's band together. And their response is like, we're not going to beat anybody up. I said, no, wait a minute, you can do that, you can do that, you can do that. Together we can, right? But leading up to the moment, leading up to that scene, the action is not about how are we going to battle bullies. There's big stretches in which there are bullies, and there are people who are being bullied, but there's not an active plan to take care of the bully problem. So, and I posit to you that the character that you have created is leading to a story arc in which math solves the bully problem. I don't know what that is, or if that's in here, I'm missing it. Or what he has learned in math that he never thought would apply to humans. He's now like, wait a minute, it's just like this. Or I have learned how, deductive reasoning or whatever it is. So I am looking for that connection. You take some stabs at that in his first major lyric, the solvable problems one. He gets off to a pretty strong start in this arena of addressing the thesis of I like math because it's got solvable problems. Here's a problem, I can do this, problem taken care of. That's fantastic. I wish I could do that in life. That's kind of how it gets off like that. That's a problem. I wish I could do that there. But once we get beyond about that first, I don't know how many is that, the first 90 seconds or so, the middle chunk is no longer about that. The bulk of that song is about the joy of math and the joy of equations, and then there's sort of a metaphor that takes over about, no walls too high, and the sun is beginning to climb, and it's a beach. I'm floating in a vacuum. I'm lying on a beach of sand, and the metaphor at that point of the lyric starts to elude me, because what does he want? He wants to get into a school so that he can be like lying on a beach of sand, so that he can look up the clouds to see spheres. What's exciting about math ultimately is not the content of this lyric, because I don't know that math actually allows you to thrive in freedom and solitude. I don't know that math is equivalent to lying on a beach of sand and all the things that he's excited about, climbing walls and so on. Where the scene starts is math is an escape. But the lyric then is about math is a big expression. Math is me being myself. Math is being free. But then it doesn't relate back to bullies. So I question from about where you start mentioning so much is possible. Because I know this song ultimately relates to the final song about find your future and believe in yourself and follow your dreams and have the courage to stand up for yourself. But I'm not sure ultimately whether that's Kevin's true issue, at least in this draft. Is Kevin's issue, is his problem with bullies that he's afraid to be himself? That he's afraid to believe in what he can achieve? He in fact, in this celebration, is going, I am really good at math. I see a problem, I can solve it. In math, I'm a winner. He does not have self-confidence issues. And yet the bulk of the action of the show seems to be leading us, like that whole Beatle metaphor, and Dad in general, seems to be leading us towards, you gotta have confidence in yourself. You gotta stand up for yourself. And when he rallies, or when all the nerds together rally and say, together we can do it. We can clear the obstacle that's in front of us. So I'm not sure you've set up Kevin having that problem. And I'm pretty convinced that it's math, that math does not solve that issue. His joy or his ability to think in math or mathematical terms is not what leads him to believe I can achieve. He already really believes that. He believes he can get into this school. And so his journey of self-confidence is not currently the arc that I think you're aiming for. Elise is mentioning things about his biggest problem is that he can't relate to people. I I think I could find some moments in which that was illustrated, but that didn't feel to me like his biggest problem. Because he talks to them. He's new in school. He even talks to the bullies. He's not interested in, going to see the new Wizards movie Part 7 with Margaret, but it's not because he can't talk to her. It's not like he's like it's because he's just more interested in math. So I'm interested in what Elise is finding in this piece, that what attracts him to math is that he doesn't have to relate to people. Not sure that's in here yet, but that might be a really useful pathway. I don't know what that has to do. I don't know what that would have to do with Dad. I don't know how, because Dad is not about, when Dad was around, Kevin was 11, so he wasn't really talking to him about, so your relationship with girls, that was not their topic. Dad was more about, don't give up. You're a smart kid. Think of another way around. Think of a different way around. It just, if you first go, I don't know, I can't do it, don't accept that answer, because you're smart. Use your skills and figure out what the problem is, right? Am I right? I think not. Yeah. But I wish then, if that's Dad's lesson to Kevin, Elise was alluding to this, that lesson Kevin heard 3 years ago when he was 11 years old. So why hasn't he learned it now when he's 14? What happened in those 3 years? I think you could do that. I think it would be like, it's 3 years and I haven't learned from my dad. I keep hearing my dad pops up and says what I just said. There's another way around, but there never is. But this Kevin, in fact, is a problem solver, at least in math. So there's some clash of metaphors there of Dad's advice and what Kevin needs to learn. And is it about bullies or is it about relating to kids? So there's a number of really interesting theses on the table, but I think my suggestion for you would be to I don't mean go back to the outline because your story is clear. I mean go back to what's drawing you to this piece. What are you trying to say? And then make sure you're saying it. And we've probably talked about this in past critiques. It might be useful to say, what's the thesis? What are you trying to say to your audience? And then have Kevin not believe that at the beginning of the show, or believe the opposite of the show, of that at the beginning of the show, and then by going through the events of your show, he learns the truth of your thesis. He started out disbelieving and learns it. You must relate to people if you're going to have a satisfying life. But he doesn't believe that at the beginning. Maybe he has no need of people. Then, secondly, once you've done that, it's like, that's my thesis. I know what it is, and then have Kevin learn it. What does Oscar have to do with all of that? Does he learn from Oscar? And I'm having troubles finding the lesson that Kevin learns from Oscar. Oscar right now is a bodyguard and a fount of knowledge. He's basically a teacher, but he's teaching subjects. He's not teaching about the human heart and so on. So I could probably list those scenes in which that's happening, but I don't see Kevin learning it. I might see Oscar spouting it, but I don't see Kevin's need to learn it. And how is he different the other side of having interacted with Oscar? So I'm not suggesting that you take Oscar out of the show because you don't really have that, but he kind of belongs on that side of the list. Right now, if you pulled him out, what would your story be? What is Kevin's arc without Oscar? And how do you need Oscar in order to catalyze Kevin? So I'm not yet seeing that. So let me touch on two other lyrics, just. But I would take the thesis that you're trying to say and then measure it against each one of these lyrics and say, what's the point of this lyric and how does it relate to the show? Like for instance, the last lyric is about. My guess is on your comment cards, if there's a question of what is this show about, a lot of them will say something like, and then quote the last lyric. They would quote, don't wait till tomorrow to start, believe in yourself, have confidence, you can do anything, practically anything, go ahead, find your future, you can do anything. I suspect most people would say, what's this show about? You can do anything, find your future. And they'd be convinced that they saw a show in which that happened. I don't know that Kevin had a problem about finding the future. He knew what he wanted in scene one. He knew how to go about getting it. It's hard for him on a very practical level, but not on a personal level for him to get it. So I don't think his journey is towards this end lyric. I don't think you've put him on a journey in which he needs to learn. Make sure your mind is aligned with your heart. Don't wait until tomorrow to start. So, and I'm less questioning Kevin in this paragraph than I am questioning this lyric. I don't know that this lyric is what your show is about. There's a little bit of the have the courage to battle your problems in this part of the show that's part of this lyric. But I don't know that many of your characters are having troubles finding their future or believing in themselves. All the nerds know it. They know they don't fit in, but they all know who they are and what they're aiming for. It's just they get mocked for it. So I would question the thesis of this final song and go, what's the thesis of my show? Not what's a big anthemic thing that I can get everybody to stand up and go, yeah, I love that show, I'll follow my heart, dude, I love your show. Which is what it's currently doing. And look at another metaphoric one, and that's Dad's Beatle song, which again I think has, once we hear it, has resonance throughout the entire show. I think we keep referring back to what was Dad's advice? What was Dad's advice? Dad's advice here is be like the beetle. There's a big thing you cannot move, but that does not mean you can't move it. If you've got a problem you think you can't solve, figure out a different way to solve it. Like the beetle finds a little wedge and he sticks underneath there and is able to work it like a lever and roll it over. That's a pretty clear message. That is not a math message, that's an engineering message. And so I question, boy, why that? I don't know that that's the right message I don't know if that's the right solution for Kevin. It's also, I'm going to nitpick a little bit. The rock is here, finds a little wedge underneath it and uses it like a lever, but you need a plank in order to use it like a lever. You need something. Dad's engineering isn't going to work. So
third point.
You need a third. Yes, yeah. The fulcrum. He's just saying, get yourself a fulcrum, and then the rock will move. It's like, well, no, you need a fulcrum, and then you need that. And how the beetle is going to push down on the lever? It's like, well, Dad, actually, that's not going to work. So that's fixable, and in fact might be kind of comic. Like, Dad, that's just a wedge. You mean a lever? It's like, see, that's what I'm trying to teach you, or something like that. But I question. I know Dad is an engineer, right? Or a designer. What does Dad do? You can answer.
He's an engineer.
He's an engineer. Yeah,
Winds
yeah.
up in
So
inventing.
so I understand that that's his world, and therefore what he has to give to Kevin. But I think you gotta make that bridge into math, because Kevin's not an engineer. And so the solution that keeps resonating throughout the rest of Act 1 and the rest of Act 2 is, what was that about the beetle? Oh, that's right. Use simple machines, like pulleys or levers or cantilevers or something like that. And that's not going to help our Kevin. That's not going to help a mathematician. So I wonder about that metaphor. As delightful as it is to see Dad and son together, and son learning the lesson and them singing at the end. I also would like to, again, a little bit tiny here, but sometimes, Dad says, sometimes you're going to feel just like that beetle did that day. That beetle didn't feel terrible. That beetle saw this boulder and said, the beetle never feels bad. He says, that stupid rock is in my way. The time may come when I'm beaten, but that is not today. I'm going to stand my ground. So when Dad says, someday you're going to feel like that beetle did when everything goes wrong, it's like, no, that's not how the beetle felt. So that middle section, which they then repeat, like, that was not the point of the story. If you have the beetle going, there's this big thing, and I gave up. I feel terrible. That doesn't happen in your lyric. I think in order for Dad's point to be made, Dad needs to say, remember the moment when the beetle is defeated? Sometimes you're going to feel like that. But you got to make the beetle feel like that in order for the lyric to pay off. So it's saying, this beetle, in fact, is a winner. I got a problem. I can solve that. I'm not going to stand for that. How can I do it? What can I do? What can I do? I know, a wedge. He's a problem solver. The beetle never felt anything but determined. And then I'm going to nitpick a little bit more, because this is an engineer talking to a really brilliant math kid. It says the engineer to the math kid, look at every angle. I like that. Like that, the angles, it's both engineering and math. Look at the angle. Look at sky and ground. And I'm going, wait a minute, sky isn't an angle. Ground isn't an angle. So the literal lyric is, and when everything's going wrong and the world's in your way, don't let it slow you down. Look at every angle, sky and ground. Think of every single fact from. So I'm going, especially to a math major, looking at the sky, he's not going to find an angle there. So I would stick with the angle and the math and not get into the sky and the jumping and the beaches and the sun. That, I'm extracting here and relating it to the other lyric we were talking about. I think in general, with these lyrics, we'll get off to a good start, and then they get off onto sort of a pop lyric metaphor about the future and the sun and the beach and the stars. There's a lyric somewhere about follow your star in the middle of the day. Can you sing that for me? Is that in the last thing?
It's in the final song.
It's in the final song. Do you know what I'm talking about? Oh, here it is. Yeah. So they say, don't get lost or drift away. The sky is in sight, so pick out a star and keep it in focus every day. In the daytime, I can't see any star. So, do you mean star at night, or what are we looking in the sky for every day? So I would caution the pop metaphors, in which you can get away with this and it's not a problem. But for a literal math kind of character, and for musical theater, I don't think a metaphor within a metaphor kind of song is your friend. So there we go.
Well, I wanted to jump on and be redundant with one thing that you said, because I think that was a really cool observation that you made when you talked about how when you see a show called The Bully Problem and the guy is a mathematician, you're expecting that math will solve the bully problem. I think that's a really interesting thing to grab onto. He does solve a problem with math, with the vice principal when he says your budget's wrong.
Yeah.
And that's a really cool moment, because that's a moment where Kevin is active and his ability, his actual innate ability that he's good at it,
saves
fixes
the room.
that
Saves
moment.
it for his friends.
Saves the room for his friends. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
It winds up being relegated to a sort of a secondary moment because there are so many things yet to come in the show that it doesn't. So I would think about, is there another moment in which, or that kind of a victory could propel Kevin to a point where he can honestly save the bully problem with math.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that would be pretty damn awesome.
Yeah. That was my expectation once I saw he was a mathematician.
And it is very satisfying in that moment when he does it, because it's so right for Kevin to be the one to say, oh, by the way, your math is wrong.
Yeah.
And then I would encourage you to think about something more, that I would say that doesn't have to be the moment, because that's just arithmetic.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And arithmetic's sort of dull. I mean, I loved math when I was a kid. I hated arithmetic. I thought it was boring. You can use a calculator for that. Seriously, arithmetic. So what? To me, the exciting stuff about math was quadratic equations and algebra and figuring out the word problem, not doing the arithmetic once you had the formula, right? So it'd be really interesting if Kevin were able to solve the day with something a little more advanced. And even he could see this moment. That was just arithmetic.
Yeah.
Any idiot should be able to do that.
There's certainly stuff in calculus and being able to measure the unmeasurable, by breaking it down into smaller, ultimately you can't break it down smaller, so you have to measure the unmeasurable. And there's something there in calculus. There's also something in the math of quantum physics and string theory and all. I don't mean to turn him into a physicist, but the math part of physics, because again, physics and bully, you might be able to.
Yeah, so I think it'd be a more interesting place for you to put your energy rather than having the high school bullies. Have him have to solve the junior high bullies with something that really does relate to what he's good. Only Kevin could solve it.
So here's a radical thought. I had to do this in the last couple minutes, but if he could solve the bullies' problem, whatever causes the bullies to want to be bullies, by his math. I don't know what that is, but like taking the lunch money and invested in compounded interest and so on. If instead of taking $1 from a kid, you take $1 from your mom and put it in the bank, and then I don't know what the bullies want. I don't know why in your universe bullies bully, but if by their seeing Kevin and watching them watch Kevin learn and become a grown-up, as it were, or learn about human being, they go like, I don't need to bully anymore. That would be so satisfying.
There's an email that I have to pass on to you from someone who saw the show, who said that she was bullied when she was a kid and loved the show and thought it was absolutely amazing and adored it. But she did at one point, she said, but if I had to say something that I would like to see, I'd like to see why the bullies are bullies.
Yeah.
And so that is an interesting arena.
Yeah.
And there was an earlier draft where your high school bully turned out to be, and I totally get, you had so many layers that I totally understood why this went away, but he turned out to be really smart, and he was sort of hiding it from his bully friends because it was his, it was his thing. He couldn't let them know that he was actually a bit of a nerd himself, and he got outed, and that's how he got defeated, was because he was outed for the nerd that he truly was. So I'm not suggesting you put that back in, but I think if you can find a way that we understand a little bit more about why the bullies are bullies, if it can all tie back into Kevin, this would all go back to my number one thing about activating Kevin. If Kevin can be the one who solves it, and if he could solve it with what he's good at.
It also could be that
cool.
that Dad failed in this arena, and Kevin succeeds. It could be that the example that he got from Dad. Dad also was bullied. I don't mean necessarily in the school playground, but there might be an equivalent. And so, by his interacting with Dad, whether he's a memory or a vision or a dream, and he realized I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna do something better.
What you did that screwed things up.
Yeah.
Anyway, I want to just to wrap up.
Here comes the sandwich.
Say again, the sandwich. I just want to say again that it was really great to see it come to life, and there's so much good work here, and that in a way that is your gift and your burden. There's so much good work here, and now you need to figure out how to focus it and clarify it. But my God, you've got a lot of
and it's really funny. It's really
funny. It's
the
witty.
book is funny. Yeah.
It's so you've got it's operating on so many different levels, and I think focusing it in will not only allow you to shorten it, but also allow you to really clarify the journey of your lead character. But you've got plenty of material to work with, so thank you so much.
Right.